Greetings and welcome back to my channel. I am Ken McAuliffe and I am Ken McAuliffe, the Jazz Vinyl Audiophile. Welcome back to the channel, where today we're going to talk about this great, not really new box set. I've had this for a couple months, I guess. Ornette Coleman, Genesis of Genius, the Contemporary Albums. This covers Ornette's first two albums on Contemporary, and I would not be surprised if we begin to see, well, actually, Ornette is still, it's weird, you know, Ornette is still not as popular, I think, in general, and maybe understandably so is Coltrane and Miles, and anybody you'd care to list, you know, from the Blue Note era or the late 50s or any of that stuff. But when I go back, if I haven't listened to Ornette Coleman in a while, and I go back and listen, the first thing that strikes me is, especially these first two records, but in a way you're hearing bebop through a filter of Texas blues, Texas country music, Midwest Plains music, New Orleans. You know, Ornette has such an original vision, and it's funny to think that in 1958, when he started playing, I think it's the 5-spot in the Village, and all the journalists really trumpeted him and heralded him as something new in jazz, and that pissed off people like Miles Davis, who were on, you know, top of the world. 1958, 59, he just put out all those amazing records. Actually, a little bit earlier than that, the Workin', Smokin', Steamin', Relaxin'. But in a way, as much as I love those records, those Miles records with the great quintet, I wouldn't call them staid. Those are beautiful records, amazing recordings, beautiful playing, but it's all very controlled. You know, maybe from Miles is the boss, but it's also, in a way, the sound of the past. You know, they're playing standards, they're playing the American Songbook, which they perfected as a style in jazz. They created the template of playing American Songbook, just as Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra did vocally. And Ornette's music, even now, compared to Miles of that period, and a little less so, Coltrane was about to come out with Giant Steps, but the first two Ornette albums on Contemporary, which are here in this box set, Something Else, the music of Ornette Coleman, Tomorrow's a Question, the new music of Ornette Coleman, and it also comes with some cool, a very informative, historical little booklet, which I think is all Nat Hentoff, and some quotes from Lester Koenig, the owner of Contemporary, I believe, and Ornette Coleman. But when this music is really is the sound of freedom. And even now when I play it, when I played this album, the first thing I hear is bebop. The lines are jagged, they're fast, but they're very much bebop, but they're not on the downbeat, they're not on the beat. They're very irregular and scattered and loping and long, and they're funny. This music, a lot of it's just really funny. In a way, it sounds like a bunch of hillbillies to me. You know, hillbillies, you know, in California, in LA, playing with Billy Higgins and Red Mitchell and Shelly Manne and Percy Heath, these really sophisticated, extremely sophisticated players. And these guys show up, Ornette Coleman shows up, and he's like reinterpreting. First of all, it's all original tunes, and they're so memorable and so quirky and almost off the cuff. They're so fresh, and the improvisations are so fresh, but it really does sound like a bunch of hillbillies just rode in on a truck. There's nothing threatening about it. Maybe because they were so sure of themselves, and particularly the second, Ornette's second group, well, not the second group, but when he went to Atlantic with the group that really blazed all the trails with Ed Blackwell and Charlie Hayden and Don Cherry, they're so self-assured and they sound like nobody else. Ornette, you can just hear the raw Texas blues in his playing. You can hear the country music. You can hear the wide open plains of Texas. You know, I tell people I grew up in the South. I was born in Detroit. I grew up in the South in the 1970s, and for a while I lived like really out in the country in North Carolina, and that's when I really embraced the Allman Brothers, and I still think that's such an amazing band. And the Allman Brothers really captured to me the sound of Southern highway music. You know, not the cities, not Charlotte or Greenville or Macon, but really the country, because you can hear that music is so free. You know, there's a similar spirit in Ornette Coleman stuff. You know, obviously jazz, but there's just such a it's just very fun music. Bebop, blues, swinging really, really hard. No piano on the second album, so it's wide open. But let's talk about the records a little bit. Something Else, 1958, with Ornette, Don Cherry, Walter Norris, Don Payne, Billy Higgins. Don Cherry, you know, the perfect foil. I don't know where Don Cherry came from, but sometimes, you know, Ornette's tone is just pungent, in your face. Sometimes it sounds like a mule or a cow. It sounds like farm animals. And Don Cherry is more sophisticated in a way than Ornette is, just in the way he plays. But sometimes his tone to me is like crinkled plastic. Part of it's that mute, and he must be very close to the microphone. But this is great, very bebopish to me. The second album from 1959, Tomorrow's the Question, with Don Cherry, Percy Heath, Red Mitchell, and Shelly Manne. Has Rejoicing and Turnaround, which I think of as standards now. The Blessing is a standard. Even the titles are unusual. Invisible, The Blessing, Jane, Chippy, The Disguise, Angel Voice, Alpha, When Will the Blues Leave, The Sphinx. The second album is more mature. Ornette seems to have calmed down a little bit. He's more sure of himself. There's even more space. There's better ensemble playing. And I think part of that is Shelly Manne. Shelly Manne is like, he is the wild card throughout jazz and jazz drumming. He played on soundtracks that we all know, from Mannix and a lot of Schifrin stuff, to you know, all the great contemporary records under his own name. To this with Ornette, he could fit in any situation. Shelly Manne is such a mature player, and he has such a deep sound. I've said before that I think some drummers, their playing comes from the bottom up, some guys come from the top down. Billy Higgins' drumming is from the top down. It's all about that happy cymbal beat. And in a way, it kind of, Billy Higgins sort of holds back the group, because it's just ding, 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 ding. It's a little, it kind of contributes to the playfulness of this record, but also the sort of pinned down nature of it, as where Shelly Manne just opens up. He can go anywhere Ornette wants him to go. These are amazing records. These are essential records. I compared Tomorrow's the Question, this new reissue, and these are cut from the original tapes. The lacquers were cut by Bernie Grunman. Doesn't get any better than that. I compared these to my, it to my original black label pressing of the same record, Tomorrow's the Question. Tonally, they're very much the same. I wouldn't say there's any change in the amount of bass or bass focus. Tone, the tone is almost exactly the same, but what's different is my older original pressing, everything is much bigger, much bigger. The individual images coming through the speakers are much bigger. I mean, a lot bigger. I was kind of shocked how different that sounded. And so it's a little more enthralling and consuming because it is so big. You can hear more of everything. And, you know, people can say what they want. 60-year-old tapes are 60-year-old tapes. And the first thing that goes is the top end. And to me, this is another example where if it's cut from the original tape, then it must get down to, you know, what machine are they cutting it on? I think they're using some of the same Scully lathes that were used back in the day. But the sound is not the same. I don't care if it is cut from the original tapes. And of course, if you've ever watched my channel, you've heard me say the same thing about other modern reissues, even though this is better than that. There's no loss of high frequency on this that I hear on some other modern reissues compared to the original pressing. Everything just sounds a lot smaller. And it's funny because unlike tone poets, generally things tend to sound a lot bigger than the originals. They sound fatter and more lush and bigger for some odd reason, if with the loss of the air of the studio. But the new pressing of this is just the opposite. My old pressing sounds much bigger. But from a musical standpoint, the new pressing is fantastic. They did a splendid job with this. I've heard some people say they're having trouble getting this box. We don't have any, we never got any into the Jazz Record Center where I work on Saturdays. But if you can find this, I mean, you don't have the first two, and because you won't find, I mean, the early Atlantic pressings are almost impossible to find, much less that first contemporary pressing that I have. Very hard to find. I don't know what this lists for, but if you can find it, it's well worth getting. And if you're going to get this, to me, then you have to go on and get the first two Atlantic pressings, as well as Golden Circle. Honestly, I never got into this. Ornette on Tenor, an unusual record. But you really have to get, if you're into the Ornette stuff, are the Old and New Dreams records, which is essentially the original quartet with Dewey Redman replacing Ornette Coleman. These are so beautiful and so much fun. This is really the evolution of what was happening on those early contemporary Atlantic records. You know, Ornette went in different directions after that, such as the two albums on Blue Note that are impossible to find. You know, you see the Golden Circle records occasionally, Volume 1 and 2 on Blue Note, but these two, Ornette Coleman, New York Is Now, and Love Call, you just never see. I've only seen them occasionally, but this is really, to me, Ornette responding to Albert Ayler and Archie Shepp. Archie Shepp, another really visceral, ballsy, bluesy player. And, you know, playing with Elvin and Jimmy Garrison and Dewey Redman. It's a weird lineup. You know, it's just weird, but it's balls to the wall. I haven't heard this in so long, I kind of forget what it sounds like, to tell you the truth. But what a great cover, right? But I feel like if you're going to start with Ornette, you need to get the first two on Contemporary, the second two on Atlantic, the next two on Blue Note, and then just go forward. The first Ornette album I ever heard was Body Meta. I read about him in Rolling Stone, I think. Well, let me check this Ornette guy out. I put that on, I was like, what the heck is this? It was all harmonics, not at all what he was doing in the beginning. But it's just so funny to think about Ornette bringing his group to the 5 spot in 1958 or 59. People were very upset. The press really trumpeted him. Miles Davis didn't like it. A lot of musicians were looking down their nose at him because he was totally fresh, and that music is still totally fresh today. And mostly it's just really fun. And with Ed Blackwell and Charlie Hayden, just two of the most swinginest mofos you've ever heard. And not New York cats. You're not getting the compressed. As much as I love Elvin and Joe Chambers and everybody who's associated with the New York school, Ed Blackwell from New Orleans, Charlie Hayden from Oklahoma, I believe, and he sounds like it. These are country dudes. These are folk dudes. These are bumpkins who swing their ass off and don't have to play second fiddle to anybody. These are tremendous records and an essential part of the jazz canon that you should have in your collection. Thank you for watching, and if you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Have a great day.